The Iron Lotus Tournament. The invitation arrived on paper that felt wrong beneath Chun Li's fingertips, too smooth, too cold, like touching the surface of a frozen lake. The calligraphy was exquisite, each stroke precise as a surgeon's incision, yet something about the ink seemed to shimmer and move when she wasn't looking directly at it. "Champion of justice," it began, "your reputation precedes you into the shadows where true warriors are forged. The Iron Lotus Tournament awaits those brave enough to test their flesh against the future of combat. Come alone to the coordinates below when the moon dies. Bring only what you were born with. Everything else will be provided." Chun Li had seen enough underground fighting circuits to recognize the pattern. Mysterious benefactors, vague promises of glory, competitors who disappeared afterward. But this felt different. The paper itself seemed to pulse with an energy that made her skin crawl, and when she held it up to the light, she could swear she saw tiny circuits embedded in the fibers like technological veins. 3 nights later, she found herself descending into the bowels of Hong Kong's industrial district, following coordinates that led to an abandoned semiconductor factory. The building loomed against the starless sky like a technological cathedral, its smokestacks reaching toward heaven like the fingers of a buried giant. "You came." The voice emerged from shadows thick as motor oil. A figure materialized. Tall, gaunt, wearing a suit that seemed cut from midnight itself. His face was angular perfection, but his eyes held the cold gleam of polished metal. "I am Dr. Meridian. Welcome to Evolution. I've seen enough underground tournaments to know they usually end badly," Chun Li said, her stance automatically shifting to a defensive position. "What makes this one different?" "Different," Dr. Meridian smiled. And the expression looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror until it achieved the precise degree of unsettling. "My dear champion, this isn't different, this is inevitable." He gestured toward the factory entrance, where steel doors groaned open like the mouth of some mechanical beast. "The age of purely human combat is ending. Tonight you'll witness and participate in the birth of something magnificent." Against every instinct screaming warnings in her mind, Chun Li followed him inside. The factory floor had been transformed into something between a gladiatorial arena and an operating theater. Banks of monitors lined the walls, their screens flickering with data streams that hurt to look at directly. In the center, a circular fighting pit was surrounded by observation platforms, where figures in surgical masks sat motionless as mannequins. "The other competitors," Dr. Meridian explained, noticing her gaze, "each has undergone modifications, improvements. They represent different philosophies of enhancement. What kind of modifications? You'll discover that soon enough. But first, let me introduce you to tonight's other participants." The first fighter emerged from an alcove to their left, and Chun Li's breath caught in her throat. The woman, at least she thought it was a woman, moved with fluid grace, but her arms ended not in hands but in gleaming metal talons that whispered through the air with each gesture. Her eyes had been replaced with multifaceted gems that tracked movement with insectal precision. "Praying mantis," Dr. Meridian announced. "Enhanced reflexes, titanium bone reinforcement, optical targeting systems. She hasn't lost a fight since her surgery." The second fighter needed no introduction. Chun Li recognized the massive frame of Thunderhawk, though something was terribly wrong. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, and beneath his skin she could see the outline of machinery. When he breathed, steam escaped from vents along his ribs. "Hydraulic muscle enhancement," Dr. Meridian explained. "His striking power has increased by 300%. The cooling system prevents overheating during extended combat." The third fighter made Chun Li's skin crawl. He appeared perfectly human until he moved. Then his limbs bent in directions that defied anatomy, stretching and contracting like rubber. His smile revealed teeth that had been replaced with serrated metal implements. "Flexibility enhancement through bone liquefaction and reformation," Dr. Meridian said with obvious pride. "Mr. Elastic can compress his body through any opening larger than his skull." "This is madness," Chun Li whispered, but her voice carried in the sterile air. "Madness?" Dr. Meridian turned to her, and in the harsh fluorescent lighting, she could see that his face wasn't quite right either, too symmetrical, as if it had been carved rather than born. "The madness is clinging to flesh when perfection awaits. Tonight you'll understand, and if I refuse to fight, oh, but you've already agreed." He held up a device that looked like a remote control crossed with a medical scanner. "The paper you touched, embedded nanites. They've been studying your nervous system for 3 days now, mapping every pathway, cataloging every response. You're already part of the tournament, Champion Li." Horror flooded through her as she felt a strange tingling in her extremities. "What did you do to me? Nothing irreversible. Yet, The nanites are merely observers for now, but should you attempt to leave, he pressed a button, and agony shot through her nervous system like lightning. She collapsed to her knees, muscles spasming beyond her control. The pain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The nanites can stimulate any nerve cluster in your body, pain, paralysis, even death, all at the touch of a button, so you see you will fight. The only question is whether you'll embrace enhancement or remain pitifully limited by your biological constraints. Chun Li struggled to her feet, rage burning through the lingering pain. You're sick, all of you. Sick, Dr. Meridian laughed. A sound like breaking glass. We're visionaries, humanity's next step. Each of these fighters represents a different path to transcendence. Tonight we'll discover which approach proves superior. The arena lights dimmed, leaving only the fighting pit illuminated. Dr. Meridian's voice echoed from hidden speakers. Round 1, Champion Li versus Praying Mantis. Victory condition: submission or incapacitation. Enhancement option will be offered to the winner. The woman with metal talons dropped into the pit with inhuman grace. Up close, Chun Li could see that the modifications went deeper than she'd first realized. The fighter's entire skeletal structure had been altered, joints replaced with ball bearings that allowed for impossible angles of attack. You still have time to accept enhancement, Praying Mantis spoke, her voice carrying an electronic undertone. The pain of modification fades, the power remains forever. I'll stick with what I was born with, Chun Li replied, settling into her fighting stance. Praying Mantis moved like liquid death, her talons whistling through the air where Chun Li's head had been a microsecond before. But the modifications that granted her speed had cost her something else, the intuitive understanding of distance and timing that came from a lifetime in an unaltered body. Chun Li ducked under a sweeping talon strike and drove her elbow into her opponent's solar plexus. The impact sent vibrations up her arm as it struck reinforced ribs, but she heard the satisfying woof of expelled air. Enhanced or not, the fighter still needed to breathe. The battle became a deadly dance. Praying Mantis had speed and reach, but Chun Li had experience and adaptability. Where her opponent relied on the precision of her mechanical enhancements, Chun Li fought with the improvisation that only came from decades of training in purely human form. A spinning kick caught Praying Mantis in the temple, and she staggered. Chun Li followed up with a series of rapid strikes, targeting the joints where flesh met metal. Sparks flew as her attacks found their mark, and she could hear servos whining under stress. Impossible, Dr. Meridian's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. The biological fighter is adapting faster than the enhanced reflexes can compensate. Praying Mantis lunged with both talons extended, but Chun Li was ready. She caught the enhanced fighter's wrists, using her momentum to throw her across the pit. Praying Mantis hit the far wall with a crash of metal and flesh, her optical systems flickering as she struggled to rise. Yield, Chun Li said, standing over her fallen opponent. The enhanced fighter's gem-like eyes focused on her with visible effort. I yield. Round 1 to the biological fighter, Dr. Meridian announced, though his tone suggested he was reading from a script he hadn't expected to need. Round 2. Champion Li versus Thunderhawk. The massive fighter dropped into the pit with a sound like a steam engine. Up close, Chun Li could see the extent of his modifications. His entire torso had been opened and rebuilt around a mechanical core that glowed with internal heat. Tubes and wires ran under his skin like technological blood vessels. This is your last chance to accept enhancement, Thunderhawk rumbled, his voice carrying the echo of the machinery within his chest. My hydraulic systems can generate enough force to crush steel. Your bones will shatter like glass. Then I'll have to make sure you don't hit me, Chun Li replied. Thunderhawk's first punch moved like a piston, fast despite his size. Chun Li barely dodged, feeling the wind of his passage ruffle her hair. Where his fist struck the arena wall, it left a crater the size of a dinner plate. But the hydraulic enhancements that gave him power had made him predictable. Each movement followed mechanical patterns, efficient but lacking the chaos that made human fighters dangerous. Chun Li began to read the rhythm of his attacks, slipping past his guard to strike at the cooling vents along his ribs. Her kicks found their target, and she heard the hiss of damaged cooling systems. Steam began to pour from Thunderhawk's body as his internal temperature rose. His movements became increasingly erratic as overheating affected his control systems. Your modifications are failing, Chun Li observed, dancing away from another thunderous punch. Impossible, Thunderhawk gasped, but his voice carried the strain of systems pushed beyond their limits. I am perfection. You were human once, Chun Li said sadly. That was your perfection. Her final attack was a spinning heel kick that caught Thunderhawk in the temple. His optical displays flickered and went dark, and the massive fighter toppled like a felled tree. Emergency cooling systems activated automatically, bathing the arena in frigid mist. Round 2 to the biological fighter, Dr. Meridian announced. But now his voice carried an edge of something like fear. The final opponent, Mr. Elastic, flowed into the arena like liquid nightmare. His body undulated and shifted, limbs stretching to impossible lengths before snapping back to normal proportions. "You begin to understand," he said, his voice seeming to come from multiple directions as his throat elongated and contracted. "They see you as a threat now. The pure human who defeats their perfect machines." "What do you mean?" Chun Li kept her distance, studying his bizarre movements for patterns. "I was the first," Mr. Elastic continued, his head rotating a full 360 degrees while his body remained stationary. "The prototype. They promised enhancement, but what they delivered was," he gestured at his fluid form with disgust, "this. Then help me stop them." "Oh, but I can't. The conditioning runs too deep. I must fight you, must try to win." But perhaps his smile was terrible to behold, serrated teeth gleaming in the arena lights. "Perhaps if you defeat me you can find the truth." The battle with Mr. Elastic was unlike anything Chun Li had ever experienced. Her opponent could absorb impacts by becoming fluid, stretch beyond reach, and attack from impossible angles. But she began to notice something. Each transformation caused him visible pain, his face contorting with agony as his bones liquefied and reformed. "They told you it wouldn't hurt anymore," she realized. "Every transformation is agony," he gasped between attacks. "But I cannot stop the programming." Chun Li felt a surge of pity for the tortured fighter. Instead of attacking his body, she began targeting his head, seeking to disrupt whatever control systems Dr. Meridian had implanted. A precise strike behind his left ear caused him to convulse, his body snapping back to human proportions. "Thank you," he whispered, then collapsed. "All fighters defeated." Dr. Meridian's voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Initiating final protocol." The arena lights blazed to full intensity, and Chun Li found herself surrounded by the masked observers from the platforms. But as they approached, she could see that they weren't observers at all. They were more enhanced fighters, each bearing different modifications, different torments. "You've proven that human adaptability can overcome technological enhancement," Dr. Meridian's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "But can it overcome technological saturation?" The fighters moved with coordinated precision, clearly under remote control. But as they closed in, Chun Li noticed something Dr. Meridian had overlooked in his arrogance. The nanites he'd injected into her system had been studying more than her nervous system. They'd been learning her fighting patterns, her techniques, her very essence as a martial artist, and if they could learn from her, perhaps she could learn from them. Closing her eyes, Chun Li reached out with senses beyond the physical, feeling the electronic signals that controlled the enhanced fighters around her. The nanites in her system weren't just passive observers, they were a two-way connection. "You made one mistake," she called out to Dr. Meridian as understanding flooded through her. "You assumed technology and humanity were separate things. But technology is just another tool, like a sword or a staff. And I've been training with tools my entire life." She reached out through the nanite network, not fighting the connection but embracing it. One by one, the enhanced fighters stopped their advance as she took control of their control systems. It wasn't domination, it was communication. Human intuition speaking to artificial logic. "Impossible," Dr. Meridian's voice cracked. "The nanites aren't designed for reverse control." "They are now," Chun Li replied, opening her eyes to see the enhanced fighters standing motionless around her. "You forgot that humans are the ultimate adaptive system. We don't just use tools, we become one with them." The enhanced fighters began to move again, but now they moved with purpose beyond programming. They turned as one toward the observation platforms where Dr. Meridian stood, his perfect face finally showing cracks of genuine fear. "The tournament is over," Chun Li announced, her voice carrying through the nanite network to every enhanced fighter in the facility. "And humanity wins, not by rejecting enhancement, but by refusing to let enhancement reject humanity." As dawn broke over Hong Kong's skyline, emergency vehicles surrounded the abandoned factory. The enhanced fighters were taken to hospitals where the most humane possible reversals would be attempted. Dr. Meridian and his associates were in custody, their plans for technological transcendence ended by the most human of qualities. The refusal to abandon those in need. Chun Li stood outside the factory, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope. The nanites were still in her system, but they no longer felt alien. They felt like what they truly were, another tool in the hands of someone trained to use any weapon in service of justice. The invitation had promised she would witness the future of combat. In a way, it had been right. But the future wasn't the cold perfection of enhanced flesh, it was the warm adaptability of human spirit working in harmony with any tool, any challenge, any possibility. She walked away as the sun climbed higher, ready to face whatever other tournaments awaited. After all, she was still Chun Li, champion of justice, master of her craft, and now perhaps something even more extraordinary. Fully, completely, uncompromisingly human in a world that had forgotten what that truly meant.